Hello, world, and welcome to Creating That with Kelsey. We're on my story part two, and I did some somatic movement before hopping on to make sure I'm really connected to my body and my heart before I show up for you all. And then there's something about this seat, man. When I sit in this seat, then I am just flooded with emotion. This emotion is different. Like last week, talked about how I was flooded with rage and disgust. And, well, this goes to show that everything is always impermanent. This week, I'm flooded with love. I'm flooded. I can't even place a feeling to what I was also here right now, other than just describing that I'm here in devotion to dancing with the darkness, in devotion to understanding the darkness, the light, and the oneness within it all. I'm here to be of service, and that my medicine is your medicine, and that this is not about me. And that's the overwhelm of this wave that's here right now, is that me sharing my story has never been about me. It's been to show up for others. And in this episode in particular is discussing the suppression of the feminine and the feminine voice, which has been going on for thousands of years. And that as you listen, you'll know and you'll feel, you'll understand, you'll relate. This is not a unique story. This is not unique hardships. This is not unique trauma. This is not unique programming, illusionary stories, these things, the suppression. It's something that each woman feels. And especially if you've survived any type of sexual assault, sexual trauma, this resonates deeply for this now moment, but then also what's discussed in the episode from 2021. Like this now moment is me coming back and me showing up again to speak up, and to speak my truth and to shed light on the dark. And that's what I was doing in 2021, and then revealing my story and shedding light onto the dark and not letting the darkness hold me down, and not letting the illusions win, and not letting the illusions continue to manifest as truth, and peeling it back. That it was something that's here in the collective unconscious, but it's not truth. It's an illusion. It's a story that we have the power to reclaim the true essence that it's trying to suppress. And that's the that's kind of the whole thing with healing trauma, is coming back to that, like coming back to the true essence that was here all along and also never left. It's just we just got layered with all of this density. Anyway, so that was not how I planned on opening the episode today. I had stuff that which I still am, but like I sat down and whew, continued to drop in and feel into the moment. And then, yeah, that wave came in, and that continued reminder, like, and that's why I'm here. It's like, oh man, it's just all these human parts of me, that this resistance, and that I don't want to show up, and I don't want to, these stories, these stories that I don't want to show up, and I don't want to be seen. I don't want to speak on this. It's fucking directly connected to what I share in from 2021, of this particular uh sexual trauma and what happened with that. Because the story that was implanted through that, and you'll know more later, but is like, no matter what I do, no one's going to see me or hear me. So then this resistance of coming onto the podcast to share my story is like, oh, I don't want to be seen. I don't want to I don't want people to hear this or see this or listen to, all that. And like, hello, look at that parallel. Um, that's past protectors trying to keep me safe. So thank you. I witness you. I honor you. And thank you for trying to keep me safe. And and I continue to remind you that we're in a different time now, and that it's safe to speak and it's safe to be seen and it's safe to tell your story because it's not about us, that we're here to be of service for others. And yeah, here we are. So I have a few, I have a list, I have a few points that I want to talk about of how what I spoke on in 2021. There's a particular verbiage that I no longer use, and so I'd like to speak to that, but 2021 episode still provides all of it provides great value, still gets the message across. And I mean, 4 years later, we just naturally we've gone even deeper and we know more. And so I would like to dive into some of more things that I've discovered along the way. But first, at the end of this, I provided self-care tools for you all to practice to help ground yourself and bring you back into your body, because we are discussing uncomfortable things, and we don't want that to remain stagnant in the body of whatever is also stirring within you. So as you listen to these things, like, please apply those self-care embodiment tools to keep the energy moving and going, so you can also keep moving and going and not feel and not begin to feel like stuck or stagnant as by listening to these things. The thing I want to add though is the other self-care embodiment tool that I didn't talk about 4 years ago, and but now is somatic movement and dance. That is the way to get back into your body, to ground yourself, to be in the present moment. So shaking, I'ma say this all the time. Shaking your body. And that's literally moving everything around and just putting on music and just flailing like a madman. That will move the energy through. And just freely moving your body. Like when things feel too much, no amount of logic and reasoning or journaling will bring you back to the present moment into your body. Movement is what is going to bring you back to the present moment and your body. So if you need that as you listen to this, even, all right. Even as you're listening to this and things are stirring, just get up and move. Just move around, shake it out. Have a stretch, have a flowy, dancy stretch. Adding that into our little toolbox that I gave at the end of this. The main verbiage difference that I no longer use now, but I really said it a lot back then, is the term limiting beliefs. And I really don't think I've used that term since 2021. So that's been a minute. And when I listened back to it, I was like, oh, damn. Yeah, I forgot we were on that limiting belief train. So hashtag growth. The reason why I personally no longer I no longer dig in the limiting belief term is because it feels very superficial level compared to the point that it's actually trying to convey. And it sound like the way that it's portrayed on social media through spiritual coaches is that it sounds so cute and easy and just this like fun thing to like turn around and look and like, oh, just let go of your limiting beliefs and life is going to be so great now. And that's it gives off the bubblegum spirituality, love and light train. But yeah, like just let this go and you're going to have the life that you desire. But it's way more dense than that, because a belief, well, first, how people will, let me describe it a little bit, how people view that term is they say that because there's this story, this belief in your mind that you've attached yourself to. And because of that, then it limits you. It's like you put yourself in a box or in a capsule, and like you can't bust beyond that because you have this belief of yourself of like, because people will even label like, oh, I'm not worthy as a limiting belief. And it's like, oh, just let that go. And then everything's going to be great. You're going to have the love of your life. You're going to be like flooded with abundance and money and all of these things, and everything's going to be thriving. Just boom, let that go, and everything's fine. Which, yeah, there's truth in that, obviously, but the way that they go about it that I've seen is just simply like doing like journal prompts to reprogram your mind, to let in like journal burning ceremonies to let go of your limiting beliefs, and boom, done. And if that is all that's um ever told to you, to let that go and like everything's gonna magically be fine, that's where I don't vibe with that anymore. I'm gonna tell you that's really not true. There's more to it. So that's why I'm saying it's that surface level thing when there's actually a lot more underneath the iceberg, I guess. Because these quote unquote beliefs are often stemming from trauma, oppression, and colonization. So it's not just something that you write out and then you counteract it with the opposite of like, oh, the limiting belief is I am unworthy. And then the counterpart is I am worthy. And let me just write that down until somehow I believe that. Like, no, you're gonna have to really descend into your body and be with the feeling that's attached to the story. That's what I call it, like the story, the belief. Understand the energetic charge that's attached to it. And like we're ripping that weed out from your soul. So, like, and another way to say that is just like it becomes a choice that every time you notice that story, that belief coming up, you're feeling the feeling that's connected to the story again and again and again until over time the density of it is transmuted. The message that's coming from the story that's here for you to feel and understand, like you accept that, and the wisdom can be integrated so the story no longer visits you, and you're recognizing the feeling and feeling through the feeling. And then we're not even like so caught up on this whole limiting belief shenanigans. We're just noticing and witnessing and feeling, and we're in this constant practice of that. And we're recognizing and witnessing the pain there instead of just trying to get rid of the story. So, but and most people don't know how to do that or understand really what that means, or even everything that I just said. You're like, what the fuck did you just, what? Exactly. There's way more to it, and most people don't understand how to do that. And so having someone that's been experienced in this way to help guide you to learn for you to like learn how to do this yourself. And as always, there's nuance to it because AI, it can also you can also be listening to me and say like, aren't you kind of saying the same thing? Like tomato, tomato. Yes, in a way. I think I just view it as like a stepping stone. Like limiting belief is one avenue in one lane. It'll just get you so far. And then when we're looking at it as like these are actually illusions, then that's taking it to the next level of like, oh, this isn't just a belief, this is an illusion that's been implanted like throughout time, throughout our psyche, throughout like spiritually, like beyond the human essence of it too. That's how I see that in that way of like of the illusion sense. Because then for me, it also brings in through my training of somatic activated healing, of like understanding through the Buddhist psychology lens of like the three spiritual poisons, and one of them is illusions. Delusion, ignorance, like that is one of the main spiritual poisons that continue to cause suffering within humanity. And if all of that, like everything that we experience and things that are implanted onto us, and we continue to operate off of that lens, like that is what is causing suffering. And we are like structuring our whole world view, inner and outer, around that illusion. And then that's where it gets so complex and messy and a lot more to detangle, because then we form our life around this illusion that was implanted outside of us from trauma. And it's like, damn. That weight of it is a lot of what's actually there, and it's not just this little limiting belief. It's the latter, the thing I just described. Because that also, for me, what I've been realizing over the years is that the verbiage of limiting belief can feel, for me, can feel misleading and perpetuating colonization. And for me, as a white practitioner, that's something that I'm continuing to understand more, and my place in this world, in this lane of healing, and checking myself and understanding like, okay, where are we contributing and perpetuating harm, especially as a white practitioner? And like, this is one of those things because I see that in this spiritual realm of like coaches using that to hook people in for their services, is to like, let's just like go after these limiting beliefs, babe, and get the life that you desire or the life of your dreams. And it's like, girl, I dare you to look at someone, to look at a person of color in their eyeballs and tell them that something like that has this apparent simple solution. And like that's for me where I've like connecting to my own ancestors is like check yourself when you're saying that. Because it's also not just call out on spiritual coaches, it's therapists too. So like I have like experience in both realms. And so seeing that and how that is actually harmful. And I've had conversations with friends to where they've told me like of their views on therapy and how whitewashed it is. And also built on the backs of colonization, and that they've shared that white therapists don't have the capability or the accountability to see beyond their privilege therapeutically and to help people of color. And it's because of kind of terms like this. And like, so that was also bringing me back to that of like checking that. Because again, like, yeah, like imagine if we like me as a white practitioner told a person of color sitting in my office, oh, that all these stories that are going on in their head is just simply limiting beliefs. And if you were to just let that go, things would get better and you'd be free. Like, are you fucking kidding me? And that's where it was clicking. It's like, yeah, what kind of superiority and bypassing, um, insensitive remark is that? And I didn't even notice really until reflecting back on this episode that, yeah, it just that's no longer in my vocabulary, and it's changed to like illusionary stories or just pointing out the illusion itself. Because for me, even that, like for me in my own experience, like it goes beyond, I'm like, yeah, this is not even just a limiting, this goes so beyond just a limiting belief. It's not just this cute little thing that I have and like just let it go. Because even my own quote unquote limiting belief that I shared within my story in this podcast episode is beyond that, which I see now, but I obviously didn't understand then. I mean, I was understanding the certain connections, but yeah, I'm just, layers deeper here. But the story of the like, no matter what I do, I will never be seen, I will never be heard. Like, uh, that specific thing is not unique, which is what I discussed earlier, is that that story, that illusion radiates out across all cultures for and has been for thousands of years as the result of oppression of women. Like that's not just this cute little limiting belief that I just need to write down and burn and it'll be fine. Like that is fucking deeply rooted. So I can only imagine the deeper level of resonance for people of color living and people living with disabilities with that they would feel just when hearing the term limiting beliefs and certain things being equated to that as a simple solution when it's not that. Like this is the result of thousands and hundreds of years of oppression, colonization, and suppression of so many different things. Because I see this as this is a fight against oppression, which is the warfare within the 3D and the reclamation of truth and love. And then this is also simultaneously a fight within, this is spiritual warfare within all realms, all realities, all that is. And that's why I identify it as the illusion and bringing it back to the Buddhist philosophy of the three spiritual poisons and one of them being illusions. And that if that's still here and we're still operating within that and within the illusions, and that's something that we're here battling today, like that is one of the main things that is causing suffering throughout all of humanity and probably all realms. So yeah, that is why. That's why I've changed the verbiage. That's kind of been the journey the last few years. I still feel pretty like a new baby deer out here of understanding the full connection of colonization to everything, and that is my white privilege speaking to that point. Um, because my journey's been so focused on obviously on myself at first, and then we radiate out to others. But as being a woman, being a queer person, and the extensive religious programming within all of that, like that's all part of colonization in of itself with that deprogramming process. But I didn't understand that full connection, and even that was colonization until last year and a half ago. Yeah, so that's why this like feels like new baby deer stuff, but it's just wanting to share that like next level of integration for me of how that is connecting and why that verbiage has changed over time. Because then, yeah, now it's not just about letting go of that belief. It's about recognizing the illusion that we've adopted through trauma, colonization, religion, school, society, etc. And then working within that and understanding the structure of it, of how it's embedded into our psyche and our being, and exploring all parts of self and working with all parts of that to remove what's unserving and continue to embody what does serve. Because the thing about illusionary stories is that what's been fed to us can be true, and that's what's tricky to like to discern. Um, because some of it you're like, no, but this is real. Like this is what I experienced. Like this wasn't a story, this was an illusion. This is something that like continues to play out today. And that's the darkness. That's the shadow of the collective unconscious playing out, reinforcing certain stories that can keep happening, which shows us this quote unquote truth of that story, yet it is an illusion. Because if we really examine the stories that have been implanted in us through all of those different aspects of oppression and especially power and control, none of what's being communicated through those is actually true. It's hiding the true essence of whatever that is trying to suppress. Because again, bringing it back to my story that I was playing out of no matter what I do, no one's going to hear me or see me. How many women, and especially survivors of sexual trauma, like have that own narrative in some shape or form within their mind, and it will play out, and we see it as truth because then there's been consequences and continued oppression and not being safe to do such things. But when we peel it back, is not of the truth because look at me now. But the goal that illusion was trying to reinforce was the suppression of the feminine voice. So harm would not be called out. So light would not be shed onto the dark. Like, are we that's where I'm like, are we understanding how fucking deep this actually is? That when stories visit us, that they are not one, probably not just our stories. It's connected. We're all interdependent here. And so that's why it's so deep and important. Um, and it's not just a little belief that we get to snap our fingers and it's gone. Like this takes real work and dedication to eradicate the illusion to come back to truth. It's that continued practice of feeling all those feelings that would be associated or attached to that illusionary story to keep coming back to love, to keep coming back to the present moment, to keep coming back to your body, to keep coming back home to yourself, which again, that's what most people don't know how to do and do need someone that's done that themselves, who has extensive experience in that for support and guidance. But it can be done and things can be repaired. I believe that all things can be repaired. Do we have any idea and control over the time of that? No, we do not. But we show up and we do what we can do. And that's how it starts. That's how the illusion gets to dissolve. So yeah, that's that's my update. That's my long-winded update. Changing the verbiage from limiting belief to stories, illusions, illusionary stories. Because if we get caught up, even this could also be on both sides, but if we're really getting caught up in just the limiting beliefs, are we being present with the pain that's in the room, especially if you're a practitioner? So that's where the harm can come into play. And that's where I was checking myself. And that's where friends were calling out the whiteness and the colonization of from the whiteness of that, of fixing the limiting belief instead of being with the pain. Because also at the end of the day, when we are with the pain, things get to transmute, things get to relax and be held and nurtured. And that's where healing comes in. Okay, I think that's it. Yeah, I have some more notes. That's totally different conversation. This is a continued journey. So we'll say it when it needs to be said. But again, reminder of the additional self-care and embodiment tool to utilize that I didn't say in 2021, but we're saying in 2024 is dance, somatic movement. Move your body, my loves. Energy in motion, emotion. That's what that means. Get it flowing. It is definitely necessary as we're talking about the darkness, as we're shedding light onto the dark. Things are gonna be uncomfy, so move your body. Okay, and yeah, we're running out. Okay, here's the episode, my story part 2. Welcome to Creating Light with Kelsey. I am an art therapist who believes that the only way we can create light in our lives is by having the courage to feel our darkness. On this show, I will discuss trauma and ways to heal through modalities like art therapy, sexuality, and spirituality. I've been called to share my story to show that even in the midst of pain, I have found purpose. So join me as I continue the healing journey and create light within while feeling the darkness. I hope it inspires you to do the same. Hello again, world, and welcome back to yet another episode of Creating Light with Kelsey. So in the previous episode is when I started to talk about my trauma story. So if you haven't listened to that, you can go back and listen to it, episode 3. And then on this episode and the next episode, I am going to continue to share it. Again, my main traumas have been sexual abuse. So if you're going to continue to listen, this is now your trigger warning. Even though I have already started the process on showing up on this podcast and recording the previous episode, it is still difficult to continue recording and continue to tell my story because it is painful. And in my mind, they just keep getting heavier and darker. But like I said, I'm not going to be going into a lot of detail. I'm just going to be telling the story and kind of what led up to the moment and then how I was feeling and then how either the programming or limiting beliefs that then I adopted because of the traumatic incident. Because when trauma does happen, our reality shifts because the world we once knew shattered and no longer exists. But then the healing process comes in and we gather all the pieces back up and we rewrite the story because now we do have the power again. So the exact timeline on this traumatic event is a little blurry because I did block it out almost immediately after it happened up until I went to therapy about a year and a half ago. So it either occurred the summer going into 8th grade or summer going into 9th grade. I do know that I wasn't in high school yet. A little bit of backstory. I am a fairly short individual, so I was in the process of going in to a specialty doctor to see if growth hormone shots would be effective for someone my age, because usually if a child is going to get growth hormone shots. They take them around the age of 10 or something, and I was a few years older than that. So with that being said, this wasn't my normal doctor. I'm going to this person for the specific reason of talking about the growth hormone shots and whether or not I would still benefit from it or not. And while we were in the middle of the appointment with my parents in the room and then the doctor in the room, and he brings up the topic of periods. So I'm a 13-year-old girl, and I hadn't started my period yet, but I was a very active person, and I had like no body fat. So it wasn't really unusual that I hadn't started my period yet. But for some reason, the topic came up about periods, and the doctor, he had asked me if I had started mine yet, and I said no. And then the doctor told me that if he gave me a breast exam, that he would be able to tell me when I started my period. Then my parents left the room to give me privacy, and as soon as the doctor touched me, I just knew immediately that this was not right, and I could not speak. So time had passed, and then the doctor had got my parents to come back into the room, and the doctor continued the conversation about the growth hormone shots like nothing had happened. Like, again, the timeline is a little blurry, but apparently enough time had passed that of me being alone in the room that my parents thought that the doctor had already discussed periods with me while they were out of the room, when the reality was that the topic of periods had never been brought back up. So there's a lot of layers to how fucked up this situation actually is. One, downright bullshit statement of being able to touch anyone in any body part and then say that you will know when or when not that they will start a period. Again, I don't blame my parents for this. It's just societal programming is what needs to change. This is where we need to rise up and not be afraid to talk about periods and sexuality and sex and normal human life things, because they had no fucking clue that wasn't actually real. As a collective, we need to be comfortable with our bodies to know what's going on with it and to have the conversations, because it is not weird. And when we avoid sex and sexuality and anything related to the body because we think that we're going to put children's in harm's way and that they don't need to be exposed to it, I'm just here to say now, they're fucking exposed to it. And if we're here naive and then they're exposed to abuse, then we don't know what's happening. Sex and sexuality is a part of life. It's all around us. We can't shelter the children from it. We need to educate them. We take the power back by educating the children on what healthy sexuality is, the reality of abuse, and then in turn, this all protects everybody, and it protects the collective. And then we all get a better mindset around it instead of being afraid and then have it shamed or shoved down, because guess what? When it's shoved down and we don't express it, that's how abusers become abusers as well. But that last little tidbit can be a bigger conversation for a different day. So that was one layer of the fucked upness of this situation. And then two. So before I was even alone in the room with that man, that doctor, he had already primed me to be afraid and not use my voice. And I would like to break that down for you guys. At this point in my life, as I had shared in the previous episode, my voice was already being chipped away by those boys in 5th grade. And then as a 13-year-old, I was feeling extremely insecure about my height, which is why I was trying to desperately go to this doctor to get this growth hormone shot to make me taller, even though I was already past the age of when you were supposed to get it. So going into this appointment, he already knew that I was insecure. So he had that in the palm of his hand, my insecurity. And then in the appointment, before anything had happened, he had told me, and this fucking blows my mind. So I'll say it and then I'll explain why it blows my mind. So he said, in regards to my height, because of your size, no one will pay attention to you. It's going to be very hard for you to have conversations with people because it's going to be a lot of work for people to hear you and listen to you, because I guess that like they would have to look down or they might have to squat down a little bit. I don't really know where he was coming from, but I know my 13-year-old brain was then mortified. So I let this man put this story in my lap that I then adopted, of saying it, no matter what you do or how hard you work, no one's going to listen to you. No one's going to see you. So just sit with that statement. Saying that to a 13-year-old, I mean, he just perfectly primed me for abuse right there, because then when it did happen, I was speechless. I didn't tell anybody. I didn't tell my parents. I just shut down because I then believed no one was going to hear me. Then for the mind-blowing part, during my study in the beginning of 2020, part of it was dream documentation. So I documented my dreams every day for 5 weeks. And I had a nightmare during week 4, and it was storming and lightning outside, and I was at this house party or something, and then I go into the house to go to the bathroom, and I go inside the house, and it's glass everywhere from like floor to ceiling. It's glass, so it's dark, and then you can kind of see the lightning and stuff. And then this figure comes at the top of the stairs, so I can't see their face. I just know someone's up there. And then they said to me, no matter how hard you try, no one's going to hear you and you won't be able to leave. Like, you can't leave now. And then I try to start screaming, and then I stop because I was afraid, like, oh, what if this figure comes back? So then I just froze. So pause right there. The freeze response, that is a trauma response. So there is fight, flight, and freeze are the 3 main trauma responses. So in real time, when I was 13 in that appointment, my body did the freeze response. Just completely froze. And then in the dream, I froze again. But back to the study, so I documented that dream, and then I did an art response on it. So I created an art image that portrayed how I felt in that dream and recreating that scene. So it allowed me to further process that nightmare and what that meant. And because I did that, because of my study, I connected the dots. I was like, where have I heard this before? What's going on? I had completely forgotten until I documented that nightmare where that came from. That came from that man, that doctor that abused me. He said the exact same thing to me as that figure did in the nightmare. Like the same message. Mind fucking blown. So now I know it was a gift that my unconscious still had that story to an extent, which then I call a limiting belief. So that is something that has continuously held me back. If I do truly believe that about myself, that like, no matter how hard I try or what I do in life, no one's going to hear me, no one's going to see me. Well, I'm on a fucking podcast right now. Like, you are literally using your ears to hear me. So now it is just a story. But back then, when it was happening, it was reality. But then your brain, when trauma happens, is like, whoa, what just happened? This is actually real. This is my new belief. But now I am taking it back and saying, no, this was just an incident that happened. It is not your current overall reality, like all end all be all. That's what I was trying to say. And honestly, that's a story I'm still working through today as we speak. But because of the healing journey that I've been on through therapy and then taking the tools home and working on myself at home as well with self-care tools, I am now aware of it, and I'm becoming aware of it in every aspect of my life to then rewrite the story and empower myself and be like, nope, delete, no thank you. That's not my reality anymore. This is my reality now, and this new reality is full of love and acceptance and safety, and it's all a process. So that was 2 on the level layers of fucked upness that he primed me, grooming, as you would call it. I mean, it was a very short grooming, but and that's what happens to a lot of children, is that the adults put the fear in them that they will not be heard, so don't even try. So now as adults, to help raise this awareness, when kids come to you with anything, they are putting their trust in you every day. And I know sex and sexuality can be terrifying as an adult to then try and talk about it with a child. But man, you know what's more terrifying is them getting abused, So let's just take life for what it is. Like, there is light and there is darkness, and there is tough conversations that have to be had every day. And it's uncomfortable, but that is also life. Growth does not happen in the comfort zone. Strong, trusting relationships with yourself, partner, children do not happen without being uncomfortable and challenging yourself and stretching yourself. And this also does come from a place of love, because we all need the love. The children that have been abused, the parents that have had children that have been abused, if you've been abused, just everyone has experienced trauma, whether it's not involving sexual abuse. Like, no one gets out of the world unharmed in some way, and that is the human experience. So then we have this polarity within us, the light and the darkness. Like, our shadow side is there, which is the parts that we don't always want to accept and we try to shove away. Like, for me, has been that story of, you can try as hard as you want, but no one's going to hear you. So that would be my shadow side, when that shadow side was actually connected to a traumatic incident. So that part doesn't need the shame and rejection. They need the love and acceptance, and just comes together, and then it becomes a cohesive environment within the brain and the body. And with this love and acceptance, my reality changes, and then the ripple effect happens again. So then the people in my life are then exposed to this love and acceptance to hopefully inspire them to love and accept all parts of themselves. I am going on full rant mode here, but like I said, it's all relative. So to reiterate again, I do not blame my parents, especially on this situation. Honestly, I did have more anger towards them, more so in the 5th grade thing, which took longer to get through to not be angry with them. But on this incident, that in my mind, it was more clean cut, that it was the doctor who had abused me, and it was just him. So as compared to the 5th grade thing, I had more of the whole, why did you not protect me then? But then on this incident, I didn't have as much anger or blame to work through as I did with the 5th grade. But I mean, it's hard, when you go through a traumatic incident. There is, for me anyway, there was this anger and blame in all situations, not involving my parents, because like I said, things happened later on that my parents weren't even involved in at all. So it takes time to let yourself go to that place where you feel the feelings of what you're left with after the abuse happens, instead of projecting the blame and the anger, because that's like a secondary emotion, in my opinion, when the reality is, for me, I was left with sadness, So I would like to end this episode kind of bringing forth some self-care tools to the table for you guys to utilize at home if you happened to be triggered by these last couple episodes.
Getting yourself grounded is such a huge one. So depending on where you're at in the world, I live in Florida, so fortunately I can be outside all the time or go to the beach, which is perfect for grounding. But even if you're in a colder environment, just stepping outside and getting, obviously not your bare feet in the snow unless you totally want to go there, that would be great. But just getting outside and feeling the ground on your feet and taking a walk and just breathing. Any time in nature is such a great grounding tool that brings you back to your body and back to the present moment. Then meditating is another tool that I utilize daily now. So you can do guided meditations if you've never really meditated before and you can't just, sit in the quiet. Or you can go on YouTube and search meditative sounds and tones and sit and just listen to it. Just close your eyes, really pay attention to your breathing. Breathe in through the nose and breathe in slow and fill up, pushing your belly out and then really pushing all of the air out when you breathe out. Then journaling, you can journal just what you're feeling to check in with yourself, like how am I feeling today, what emotions came up when I listened to this podcast, and allow yourself the time and space to feel your feelings. And you don't have to even really have questions. You just start writing, and for me now things just go. I don't ever really have a plan. I just know I feel tense or pent up, and then I just need to take it to the journal and let it out. Then obviously art. Anything with art is great. You can just have a piece of computer paper and a pen and just go all over with it. If you need to release actual tension, going really hard, pressing, having a lot of pressure, and then going back and forth, or tearing paper and just writing scribbles. Or if you need more structure, you have those adult coloring books as well, which that's not art therapy, that's just therapeutic with the adult coloring books, but still a great tool. I personally love painting. It's a little more fluid and you have less control doing that. But there are a few things with art that you could totally do, and it would help get you back in your body. Then working out in some way. So you can do yoga on YouTube and it's free, or definitely just going to the gym and getting that bodily tension out in that way, in a physical aspect for whole body. So there's just a few self-care tools that I encourage you to take if you happen to get triggered by these episodes that we just talked about, some trauma and deep stuff. I know it's not easy. It's not easy for me to talk about, and it's probably not always easy to listen to. The next episode, I will be going into it again of what I experienced as an adult. But then after that, I will be going into the healing process and not be talking about direct incidences. It'll be a little bit more light. But going to that dark place and sharing from the beginning of this podcast of the trauma, it is important to me, and I want to share my darkness and be vulnerable and show that I have been there, and I want other survivors to know that they are not alone, that I have gone through some shit, but I'm also coming out on the other side, and to be a testament that darkness did not snuff out the light. So thank you for being here. I know that every single person has experienced in trauma in some shape or form. I want you to know that you're strong and that you can reach a point of thriving. With one decision at a time, you can come back home to yourself. Thank you for listening and creating light with me. If you enjoyed the show, spread the love by subscribing, leaving a review, or share it with a friend. If you're related to this episode, reach out and let me know. Ways to connect are listed in the show notes. And until next time, remember, when we see the light in ourselves, we create light in others.